Hello and welcome to the Turn by Turn podcast. I am joined as frequently as possible with Chris. How you doing?
I am good, but today I am Lord Gamington, ready to make demands of the games industry.
All right, so the next episode will be scripted. What he means by whatever that was is that today we are going to talk about games that are not RPGs that should be. So, Mr. Gamington, would you like to lead us off?
Lord Gamington, and yes, I shall. The first game I demand is highly specific. I would like a Fire Emblem game set in the Tellius universe, like Ike's games, but it needs to be Lord of the Rings: The Third Age.
It has to be a the JRPG with like 4 characters.
Yes, but The Third Age is not a JRPG because it's not Japanese.
Oh yeah, but your 4 warrior kind of idea.
Yes, like party of characters, traversing the world a lot, like a lot of walking, a lot of talking to people. Yeah, that's what I need.
Okay, so who are you thinking your 4 characters would be? I assume Ike, but
Oh no, definitely not. I would want 4 totally new characters, or however many characters you have, like totally new roster. Sort of like the Third Age with ties to things that you're like, oh, okay, like, 6 degrees separation, I can understand who these people are. But they're not, I don't want like Ike's long lost half brother or anything. But I think it would just be good to have another story set in that world doing something.
Okay, I could see that.
The only other one I wanted was not exactly an RPG in the Fire Emblem sphere, but I need a Fire Emblem real-time strategy, like Age of Mythology or Age of Empires or things like that. Really, I could use a Fire Emblem game like that.
Okay. So I'm trying to think of how that would work.
You play as I would probably make it like Celebration of the Series. Here's a bunch of lords together from previous games. That doesn't make a ton of sense. Logically, don't think about it too hard. I just want to be able to play as like Marth and lead an army against Roy. That's what I want to do. I want to be able to command armies around and really have more of the country like shown for each of these.
I think that could be cool. Like having you get to pick your lord, almost like Advance Wars.
A little bit like
The Fire Emblem framing. So your lord becomes your CO.
sort of. I would want him on the board, moving around doing stuff, but yeah, it's part of because I played so many hours of Lord of the Rings: Battle for Middle Earth that now I just kind of want everything to get an entry like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that ties into my the next thing I demand of the games industry, because another RTS I've played a billion hours of is Warhammer: Dawn of War, the first one, because 2 and 3 were quite jank, and they made a good thing with 1, and then 2 and 3 they just kept being like, well, we need to change it, and they didn't do that well. I need an SRPG from Warhammer, and I know they kind of have some, but I need like to know what they are, and I need like them to put as much stock into it as they do things like Vermintide or the new one coming out, Darktide, or things like that. Because the problem with Warhammer is there's just a billion licensed games. Like there's some properties that I'm like, man, you just don't license your game or your franchise to anyone. Like, let somebody make a game of this. Warhammer is the opposite. They will license it to anyone. And that has benefits, but it also has drawbacks. And one of those drawbacks is there's just a mountain of games to wade through. The quality is extremely variable. Some are glorified phone games, some are literal phone games just thrown on Steam with no changes. I mean, they're just awful. There's like multiple card games that like I don't even know anymore. It's just too much. Like I need one that has a lot of effort put into it. Really, really smart design. I would get super into that.
Okay. I could see that being a good idea.
And the world can definitely hold it. Like the lore for Warhammer is insane. Like you could definitely, it could handle an SRPG that was pretty good.
Mm-hmm. I would definitely think so. It's one of like the bigger series, so okay, we'll green light that one, Mr. Lord Gamington.
I didn't run that bit by Daniel before we started this, so.
But I'm matching along really well.
Oh, you're doing so great, peasant.
Classic professional right here. So one of my ideas, and we actually did a whole episode on this on another Zelda podcast, was Legend of Zelda is like a Final Fantasy sort of game.
I could see that.
Mm-hmm. I think it'd loan itself really well to that. I think we've seen that like Hyrule Warriors seems to have like its audience, that people like it, so we know it can kind of work in other medium, like other game styles.
Same with Cadence of Hyrule.
Mm-hmm. So I think that it would lend itself really well to the Final Fantasy, where you have your lineup of your 3 characters, because you tend to have Link, and then there's like a Goron and a Zora and a few other characters that you could kind of fit in there into like a rotating cast that could drop in and out.
Yeah, for sure.
You could even have some like promotion stuff where Link gets his horse, or like the Goron gets like the big bomb kind of thing. So I think that would be one I'd really go for. And our full flushed out thoughts can be found on another Zelda podcast.
Yeah, I think that would definitely work for sure. We'll greenlight that one.
I would love if it could be Legend of Zelda as like an SRPG. I just don't think it'd be possible.
Yeah, I don't think I would like that much, because
it'd be hard.
Granted, I haven't played many of them, but I don't like it when one of the things I love about SRPGs is the amount of characters. I like there being tons of characters, and I don't think Zelda lends itself to tons of characters that well, unless you're doing like what Warriors did and grabbing them from all over the entire franchise. But which you could do, but then you would need compelling villains as well and things like that. It would just be a lot more difficult than what you're suggesting, I think.
Yeah, it'd be really, to get a cast of like 10 characters, I think it'd be pretty brutal to do that. I think the one exception might be, and you'd really have to soup up the gameplay for it, would be if you did Majora's Mask, and like each mask was kind of a character. It was sort of the one way I could think to do it.
Before that, I would probably just say, here's Zelda from Link to the Past, and here's Zelda from Breath of the Wild, and those are 2 different characters.
Yeah, it doesn't lend itself to a massive cast of characters to the point that SRPG fans would be satisfied with it. So
I'm big into the Warriors series, and I was really impressed with how much they were able to stretch it for that even.
I think that works a little better. I haven't played the Zelda Warriors games, but
I have.
It'd be easier to stuff characters in there because they're not necessarily all in the field at the same time. Like it's a like usually like 5 or 6 characters per battle, right?
Usually more than that. It depends. It depends. We did end up having to fight the same character multiple times in the same battle, which did get a little bit repetitive, but that game was still really, really good. Another thing they did to keep it fresh was like Link had like 7 or 8 weapons, and they all had different move sets, which in terms of Warriors games made it so that Link was like 7 or 8 characters. So that really kept things really fresh as well. That if you're getting tired of playing as one, you can switch to the other. But even Link's default one, like the Master Sword, it was a really fun moveset and really good to play as. So I played as Link for a really long time and really didn't get tired of it. Because that's how I play the Warriors games. You know, I find my people that I really like the movesets of, and I kind of stick to them. And so it was really good that Link's default one was really, really fun to use.
I would like to play that at some point, but
Yeah, you definitely should.
Every Nintendo Direct pushes it down the list because they just keep announcing more and more RPGs.
Oh yeah, I mean it's awesome, but also yeah, I'm like I'm never gonna play all these. There's no way. My next idea, if you're ready to move on to that.
Yep.
Another really big series that I'm surprised doesn't have more spin-offs, and that's Halo.
I was thinking about that. Go ahead.
I mean, I don't know. I would probably do like a Mass Effect for Halo would be my thought. Just something that's less run and gun, because I'm not a big Halo person. I've played like 2 and 3 years ago, I think. I even say I think because I don't totally remember. It's not totally my cup of tea, but I think something that my impression of Halo was that something that it suffered from was just due to being kind of a first person shooter. There's not a lot of downtime. There's not a lot of slower moments, which is good, I guess, for first person shooters. But I think an RPG would give you that time to have a little bit more downtime and like listen to characters talk about the world and things and kind of get you to see the world in a new light. And maybe Halo fans are like, this is a horrible idea. But I'm like, there's already novels, and I have friends that got really into those novels, like The Fall of Reach. And they've told me that the universe is just really, really cool, and there's all sorts of awesome things going on. So I'm like, it'd be cool to see more of that, you know?
The one thing, and this mildly overlaps with what my next one was, so I'll just bring it up now, I suppose. I was thinking that like a Metroid game and like the style of like Phantasy Star could be kind of cool. And like basically you could plug in Halo in that same sort of like outline, I suppose. So you'd have, because Phantasy Star is obviously turn-based RPG, and it relies on a smaller cast of characters where you usually have like 2 or 3 max. So like Halo or Metroid would fit really well into that model.
Yeah, I think so. And Metroid's another one that is very run and gun, and you don't have much time to stop and do that. And because of that, I think also I'm not a big Metroid person. And I think that that's just sort of the nature of what we're doing too. You're going to get a lot of, well, I'm not really a this person. It's that one of the things that I like about RPGs is that there's intense moments and there's slow moments. And I like that kind of breadth of experience, that you're not panicking and running and shooting all the time. There's times that we have long stretches of dialogue and like things happen and things take their time. I really like that in a game, and that helps me get more immersed in a universe. So that's kind of what I would want for some of these things. I would want games with really strong universes and really interesting stories to slow down a little bit and let me explore some of those. And for the Halo one too, and probably for the Metroid one, I don't need it to be about Master Chief or Samus. It could be about just something else happening in the world at that time or something like that.
And I think another good point, and I'm less familiar with Halo than you are, I think, is that your maps are very pretty one direction. Like you in an RPG, you can get lost in like a house and end up reading the bookshelves in a town for like a half hour. You don't really have that in Metroid.
You don't have that in Halo either, I can tell you that. I'm not super familiar, but yeah, definitely not.
So in the Metroid games that I've played, it's been frequently like you might get some like, you can like scan things and kind of, it'll give you some like background info on like, oh, like there's a plant growing here. It's a lactobacillus culture sort of thing. And that's probably the equivalent of your bookshelves. But like it seems like there's so much story to Metroid that you kind of read about after.
Yeah, I think Halo's kind of the same way. Obviously, you see some of the really big events and you play through those, but it would be cool to like maybe even just play as somebody that's like more of an everyman reading about those events and kind of going on with that life, a more menial life, and trying to see what that's like. I think that would be interesting.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like you're asking for like a Master Chief farm sim.
No more farm sims, but no, it doesn't have to be a farm sim, but just I do like kind of those like shopkeeper, more managey games sometimes. So I'm like, yeah, you could be a shopkeeper, or you could just go on a quest that's not big as what Master Chief is doing. Like, a lot of cool stuff happens in the like even the real world. It's like there's cool stuff happening all the time. Really, like people are always doing cool stuff, but there's different scales.
Mm-hmm. Just as an aside, we have an interview on Game Dev Hideout, our other show, where I talked to Brent, who is creating a shop RPG where you run a store in a town until you make up enough money to move to like a bigger town and you buy a bigger store. And it has like some of the most fun like RPG shop mechanics I've ever like messed around with. So go check out that interview, and then his demo is out right now, so you can go check it out.
I haven't played that. I should. The
It's
thing
really
that
amazing.
the reason I say I'm kind of into those games, but not fully, is that I don't like how a lot of them scale. A lot of them scale to the point that I don't find them fun anymore because it gets so stressful. It'll be like, oh, you had fun running your store. Now what if we like cut it in half and there's a giant chasm in the middle of your store and the customers are also on fire? I was chilling, having a good time running my little store. Like I wasn't looking for this to be like, that stressful, but
Yeah, with his game, at least as far as the demo goes, that didn't happen. And it seemed like a lot of the game, like the stress of the game becomes you're involved in sourcing the materials to your store.
I see.
So it's like a resource gathering game, and then once you gather your resources, then you sell them, and then you go out and try to acquire more resources, and you're given like a set item list
I
versus.
see.
So it's structured really well, and the flow of it feels really nice. So I would definitely recommend that. You all check that one out.
Yeah, for sure. My next one that I wanted was SRPGs are my favorite. Like Fire Emblem, Shining Force, that's kind of my jam. So I'm always happy for anything to, get into that space. And some are. And I haven't played all those yet, and I do have them on my wish list. Just there's only so much time in the day. But I know like Gears of War made Gears Tactics, so I'm definitely going to check that out. Metal Slug, it's been delayed a bunch of times, but Metal Slug has Metal Slug Tactics coming out. Going to check that out. There are companies that are doing exactly that, and I'm super stoked about that. But anything that just has recognizable characters, like a good cast of them, I would definitely be into that as an SRPG.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, Pokemon potentially.
Pokemon could be a really cool SRPG. Like you throw out your whole team at once, kind of navigate your maps that way. I could see that being really easy.
I wouldn't even want to throw out a team. I would want it. They have one already, which I also haven't gotten to play yet. That they did with the Samurai Warriors guys. It was a crossover, and I'm really excited to play that at some point. I'm gonna have to make a big thing about that on my YouTube. Is kind of my idea, but I like the idea that the Pokemon are not like in Pokeballs and stuff for that.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of they're just in the world. And if I was gonna do another Pokemon SRPG, I would do another of those crossovers. But if I wasn't gonna do another of those crossovers, I would probably make it like the Pokemon Rescue games. I forget what they're called. Mystery Dungeon. That's right. I was thinking Red Rescue Team and Blue Rescue Team because those are the ones I grew up on. The first one.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I would probably do it Mystery Dungeon style, where the Pokemon all talk to each other and stuff like that and have personalities. And I thought that was a really, really cool thing in those games that didn't get explored nearly enough.
So the mystery dungeons, is that What is the difference between that and the normal Pokemon game? Is it multiple Pokemon per fight kind of idea?
No, it's the mystery dungeon games are dungeon crawlers. Like you play as two Pokemon usually, or you have two in a team, and you go into a dungeon, and your goal is to make it to either the top or the bottom of the dungeon and do some sort of objective there. And you fight tons of Pokemon along the way. You can buy items, usually from Kecleon, the little chameleon guy. Um, you can recruit more Pokemon to join your team, potentially. It's difficult to do sometimes. Some Pokemon are more agreeable than others. And ultimately, you go through a little story, and you're trying to be the best rescue team you can be. People put in requests. You need to go save people that are trapped in these dungeons, and that's your job.
Okay, I'll have to check that out at some point.
And the Pokemon all talk to each other. Like, there's no humans in this world. The idea of the first ones is that you are a human, you are you, and you are turned into a Pokemon, and you find that really weird. And there's I believe, an anime short film about it, and there was a really short manga run as well, that was pretty good. That I think came out in like Nintendo Power when that was still a thing, in like monthly increments, that I was super hooked on as a kid. I was looking forward to all of them. I was big on Pokemon Mystery Dungeon as a kid.
Nintendo Power was pretty amazing.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. I used to get hyped for Nintendo Power like we do for Directs now, because it's when all the games would be shown off, and I would get to see all these games for the first time and be like, oh my gosh, look at all these games I'll never play. It looks super cool.
Look at these games I won't be able to afford.
Yeah.
That's my paper out takes off.
Yeah, but there were some that I ended up getting out of there, like the Mystery Dungeon games. That's how I knew about that.
I'm trying to think of what another good one would be.
That was most of my big ones. I can say I had trouble with this to some extent, because I've gotten really burned out on a lot of the AAA games industry, and the only ones that I really still play are a couple of RPG series. So it's like, yeah, I'm trying to like dig deep, but it's like, yeah, I mostly play games that are in this style, so it is hard to, really want something from a franchise that's never branched out to that. But
okay, well, how about we wrap it there, and then after the break, we will leave the video game world behind and come back with IPs that we'd like to see turned into RPGs. And they may be there may be video game versions of these IPs, but we're talking something more substantial than Spy Kids 3D Game Over Game Boy cartridge.
yeah,
So
that was a weirdly specific example too.
well, hopefully the one or two people that know that game know what I'm talking about.
Oh, is this for real? Is this actually a game?
Yeah, it is. But I know a game you don't know.
You do. It sounds like you've got some trauma with a game I don't know.
No, I'll summarize this super quick. So it's a Game Boy Advance game, and there are 3 levels, but they go on forever. So basically, you're one of the 2 kids, and it's basically a tower jumping game where you have a tower that just goes on and on and on, and it gets harder to increase up the tower, but you just keep going.
I see. Lord Gamington does not demand a giant sprawling RPG in the world of Spy Kids 3D Game Over.
All right. But from there, we will cut it to break, and we will be right back.
Hey, this is TC.
And this is Jim from the Studio Demands It podcast,
Where every episode we take a demand from a hypothetical studio,
which could be you,
and challenge ourselves to conceptualize, pitch, and craft a film based on the stipulations
or the demands
we are given. We talk about movies all the time. Particularly, we complain about the choices made in the films we've seen.
We're nerds like that.
And, of course, like any good nerd does, we automatically assume that we could do better.
Even with the demands and restrictions that clearly must have been put on by a production.
So head on over to studiodemandsit.com and listen to our previous library of episodes. Our library of previous episodes. Our precious library, Jim. Our library of precious episodes.
You're a pirate, Smeagol.
Okay. So head on over to studiodemandsit.com to listen to our library of episodes.
And submit your demand for a future episode, too.
So go do that.
Okay, bye.
Okay, end of ad.
Jake, have you ever been looking for a definitive Nintendo ranking and can't seem to find it because it's just everybody's own opinion?
Honestly, all the time, Sam.
Well, I'm looking for someone to give us the answers.
Wait, you mean like a podcast made by two young, handsome men where they create a definitive top 5 list of all things Nintendo?
Should we just do it ourselves?
Yeah, that sounds fantastic.
Let's give it a shot. I'm Sam.
And I'm Jake.
And at Top 5 Nintendo, I'm going to give you my top 5 list.
And I'm going to give you my top 5 list.
And then we're going to duke it out and see what the real top 5 is.
And we are back. Welcome back. How's everyone doing? Hopefully you're hanging with us still. So, now that we've talked about video games that we'd like to see as RPGs, we are going to get to kind of probably the thicker half of the episode where we talk about things that aren't necessarily mega popular video games that could be RPGs. It's very, like we were saying, it's harder to turn video games into RPGs because they've honestly made a lot of things RPGs at this point. So I think it was hard to kind of come up with things other than like first-person shooter kind of ideas that could be RPGs because a lot of that already exists. So now we step outside the world of video games, and Lord Gamington, better known as Chris, will kick us off.
Yes, I have more demands. So, I was thinking, I really like the Samurai Warriors series. I've said that before. And I said they have an SRPG crossover with Pokemon. I'd honestly like more SRPGs that are like that. Probably from the same people. And I know that there is one more that Koei has done. They did a Dynasty Warriors SRPG, but it is like a PS4 online store exclusive. It's like download only for the PS4, and that I don't have like, and I don't have accounts set up for that and stuff. It would take a lot for me to go get that, and I still might at some point. But I'm like, either bring that to Steam at some point, because I feel like what's happening is they're like, oh, that didn't sell very well, so it's not desired, and it's like, no, it is, but like, you know, I would buy it as a disc for the PS4, or I would get it on Steam. I would even buy it as a cartridge for my Switch. I'm not big on downloadable console games because there's just not enough space to like justify that. But I'm like more historical things. I'm really into history, and part of the reason for that is the Dynasty and Samurai Warriors games growing up. I was playing those growing up as a kid, and it was really cool that there were these awesome stories, and then they could go, and it really happened. So I would like just more. You don't even have to just do it from them. You could do pretty much any event I would play as an SRPG. I know there's games like, I think it's Banner of the Maid is also on my to play list, and that's like the French Revolution, I think, as an SRPG.
I think that would be cool. It's always fun to bring in historical things that have actually happened into like that video game sphere. And I think that that'd be a good way to teach people about different historical events
Yeah, the only challenge I see is that sometimes I've talked about this with some other people, and some people get like weird about it. That it's like, oh, but like it would be offensive to have like certain historical events be in a game, and my response to that was kind of, well, to me, games are just another art form. It's not offensive to have a movie or a book about those things. Why would it be weird to do it as a game if it was done well? But like if you're doing it with like this is the honest history of this thing, then I think that could be a really, really good educational tool. Because the best educational tool to me is fun. You know, if you make something fun and interesting, then you don't have to push people to do it. You know, people will just be happy to go do it.
Mm-hmm. That'd be. It was just kind of making me laugh that we have our episode on video game choices, and if you were making a historical game, like the choices would have to be super specific because you like could choose to have an event not happen. So
Yeah.
have it guided a little to kind of frame it in.
But I mean, I think depending, you could let the player also make those choices, either good or bad, and you know, then you have the characters react accordingly. I forget what game was it that I was reading about the other day. I think it was like in Red Dead Redemption, somebody was writing about like how they came across this like guy that was really happy just growing vegetables or something, and he was like, "Oh, I've made so much money off growing vegetables." And the guy was like, "Well, yeah, as a player, I did what I do and I shot him in the face and I took that money." And it was like $12 or something, and that was a lot of money to that guy. And he was like, it didn't have any bearing on the story. No one knew I did it. But he was like, I stopped playing the game for like 2 or 3 weeks because I felt so bad about what I did. And like he was like, it really bothered me. And I thought that was hysterical. But also like I'm like, yeah, like that could be a good teaching tool, like in history games as well. It's like, you know, it's like if you're like, oh, I'm gonna, you know, make the wrong choice historically, and then like, yeah, you let the player do that, and then there's consequences, and you just let them sit with that, and it's like, oh, well, now I feel terrible, and it's like, yeah, now you understand why, at least a little better, why these were bad things.
I have a less serious idea. So I was thinking that, again, SRPGs are some of my favorites too. I was thinking we have plenty of like Marvel comic book character games. There's tons and tons of them. But I was thinking that you could do like an SRPG around basically the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and that could be pretty cool. Have it be like a completely original story. Don't have it stuck in the Marvel world of occasionally confusing continuity stuff. Just have it completely separate, but with like that like range of characters, and then you could have a pretty solid SRPG. I know I'm not sure I've found people who really like the Avengers game that's out right now. So I think if you recontextualized it, you might be able to get some people to really enjoy it.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't do like Disney stuff at all anymore. So like I wouldn't be interested, but I know there's definitely a large contingent of people that it's definitely one that I'm confused as to how there's not more of.
Because early on, like all the movies had games. Like the first Iron Man movie had a game. The Hulk.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that.
The Captain America movie had a game, and then it just sort of stopped. And then we got a couple of different Lego versions.
Yeah. Well, I feel like that's also that licensed movie games, like they had their era, and I don't feel like that happens anymore.
Yeah. That's why I think when we're suggesting certain things that they might exist in video game form, but it's either have that licensed game funk where they're kind of weird, not terrible, but like the quality is sometimes kind of iffy.
Yeah, you can tell like it was a job for somebody to make this.
Yeah, it
wasn't a passion project.
It was a get Iron Man's face on something kind of thing.
Yeah, I actually hadn't realized that until you said that the movie tie-in games have kind of dried up, and I'm like, why is that? Like,
you get it for like a lot of like the kid focused like animated stuff.
Do you? Are there Paw Patrol, like, maybe it's just that I'm not as in touch with this anymore, but I'm like, are there like Paw Patrol games? Like, I don't want to
No.
I don't want to deviate too hard, but
Was your next idea was Paw Patrol, I assume.
oh yeah, the Paw Patrol super in-depth, you know. I need Mass Effect, but it's Paw Patrol.
It's not horrible. We'll greenlight it.
I like that that's one of my ideas that gets greenlit. I'm like looking this up now because I'm like, are these games that exist? Like,
yeah, there are still some there. There was a Power Rangers movie that came out a while ago that had a game based on it. There's a Paw Patrol game. There's like Trolls came out a while ago and that has a game. So
oh my gosh, there's like a million Paw Patrol games. I'm just not in touch anymore. I'm old.
Yeah, so they still exist, and I'm obviously cannot speak to the quality of them at all, but
you can't? I'm shocked.
No, after the first like 13 games, I was done with Paw Patrol, but
you're not far off.
Are there really
like,
13?
I put in Paw Patrol Switch just to see, and it immediately brought up 5 that are different.
Are any of them SRPGs?
It doesn't look like it. Okay, there's at least 6. There's a Mario Kart ripoff. I can see that.
Interesting.
Wonder how that is. But yeah, I don't know what the rest of these. The rest of these, it's not readily apparent what they are. I'm sure all of our 6-year-old listeners can absolutely school me on what all of these are.
I think we have some listeners that are dads who might be pretty dads or moms who might be pretty clued in on Paw Patrol more than we think. So if you want a Paw Patrol episode, just let us know in the comments.
Oh my! I mean, they're not cheap. I'm sorry, they are cheap. They're all like $15 to $20. So like, it ain't much. I would have some explaining to do about why I suddenly own a bunch of Paw Patrol games. I think that would be the hardest part of that. That did give me an idea though. Why is there not like a big Ninja Turtles RPG?
That's a good point. It's been a lot of like first person kind of stuff, right?
Well, not first person.
Well,
I don't know if there's been a first person, but there's been a lot of like side scrolling fighting games, which I totally get. I get that like it lends itself to that very well. You could totally do an RPG. That's another world that's definitely big enough.
Yeah, and you have 4 characters already, so
yeah, and I mean, usually the games like will throw in Splinter, April O'Neil, and Casey Jones for like 5, 6, 7.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, it'd be pretty easy to get a rotational cast.
It seems like we're doing the Turtles in Time thing a lot, so you could do the different variations of all of them as well.
There can be like a special bonus where you get the painters and things that are based off of. So you get Michelangelo as like a bonus.
That would be adorable.
I almost like want it to happen now just so we can talk about that.
In that same vein too, I think one of our viewers might have a conniption if I don't bring up The Last Airbender.
Oh yeah, we got to bring up The Last Airbender. That would lend itself really well too. And there are some games based on it already.
There are. And I watched there is a Legend of Korra SRPG.
Is there really?
There is. I watched he has since left the internet, and I get why. But the YouTuber I'm sorry, he doesn't like to be called that. The content creator, Harvester of Eyes, did a review that was really in-depth on the Korra SRPG, because he's huge into SRPGs as well, and also huge into Last Airbender stuff. So he was like, this was made for me. I might as well review it. And he had good and bad to say. The balance was a little bit jank, and you can tell it was sort of rushed out the door. There were some things that maybe should have been in that weren't, like art assets and characters. Like, I'm not super big on Korra. I just did like season 1, and it wasn't really for me. But I understand the character Asami is absolutely massive, like an integral part of that show. And she is not anywhere in the game for some reason. She's just absent.
You'd think an SRPG, it's kind of all characters on deck sort of thing.
Yeah, I think there were only 5 or 6 characters, and somehow Asami didn't make the cut.
Hmm.
And I think they didn't mention her at all because that would at least require another art asset that they didn't have. So it was not very good. And then when he finally beat the game, he was like, it just sort of ends. There's not like, I think it takes you back to the main menu or something, and then you can't replay old levels either.
Hmm.
So it just sort of ends. Like, I don't even think there was credits. And
Really
like,
odd.
yeah, it was really bizarre. But we like The Last Airbender is a strong enough IP that I think we should maybe revisit that.
Definitely. And that's depending on when you're listening to this, they're working on another live action attempt at this. So it's possible that that's something that could be in the pipeline.
Oh, yeah.
Depending.
I know the original creators are part of that live action, but I'm just like, I don't know. I don't need like, I'm not big on remakes of things. Like, I'm like, if you're gonna put all of the time and effort and the money, like, just make a new thing, you know? Like, even if it's more Last Airbender, like, I would dig that. But like, give me like a live action about the Earth Kingdom or something, you know?
It's like in that case, like I think that show's like almost like perfect. So it's like it was perfect. Do we need it to try it again? Like
Yeah.
they nailed it. Like
Yeah, I agree. Like that.
like we don't need it again because we got it and it was perfect and like wonderful.
It would be very hard to improve on it in any way.
Especially adding in actors and stuff can like if you know I don't know. Never mind.
Yeah, stuff can get messy real fast. It can get weird. Sometimes it's good to just leave a good thing alone. And like, I'm not mad at Korra either because it's like it's way later. Like, I don't know, it doesn't like ruin or tarnish anything to me. Like, if you like it, that's great. If you don't, that's also great. Like, Avatar's always there, so it's like I don't know. But yeah, definitely. And it doesn't have to be an SRPG either. I know that's what I like, but like, I mean, you could almost have like a Breath of the Wild for The Last Airbender.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Like Aang, like the Airbenders are such like have such, or really all of them have such like movement options that like you could do a lot with that in a game, like interacting with environment and moving around in the space, like in unique ways that I really don't think we've seen in anything else too much. So
Mm-hmm.
it's odd to me that that one is such an untapped thing.
Agreed. And I think that, like you were saying, Breath of the Wild, like we just did Pokemon Legends Arceus. Like that would be the same sort of idea. And it'd
Yeah.
work really well with
Yeah, you could even do it like that and set it super far in the past. You know, there's like how many avatars before Aang? You could do any of those stories. Like
mm-hmm.
you could point to anybody in that lineup and go, "We're gonna give you that guy's story or that girl's story," and I would be like, "I'm in."
Yeah. And you'd get like the flying mechanics and the water mechanics, even though I thought the water mechanics in Arceus are pretty out there. But you'd be able to incorporate basically all of that really easily, and it'd be super cool. So that's
Yeah,
cool.
I think that's even a good idea for like an indie person. Just take that bending idea and like do an like a more open worldy thing with that. That could be really neat.
Mm-hmm. And there's so much lore in Avatar that, again, it bodes well for exploring.
That's what I'm saying. It would like I love like this is another like RPG thing. I just love. This is why I love RPGs. I love the like little just tidbits of lore. I'm definitely a lore person. Like really, when I get into a franchise, I get really, really into the like nitty gritty details. So it'd be really cool to me for like a Last Airbender thing that you know you could see like I don't know, like maybe one of the air temples is like being built or something, and it's the one that Aang stops by at some point. Like just a little nod like that.
And you could even like the world it's fully animated that you could even just like recreate a lot of the show within that open world sandbox, and you could visit like a lot of like Ba Sing Se or okay, we're green lighting it.
Yeah, there's a lot there.
I'm on board.
Now I'm like, what else? What other like things did I watch when I was younger that I'm like, oh, the SpongeBob RPG? No, I'm just kidding.
There's probably a large contingency of people that would buy that regardless of cost and get
Maybe.
the book and the DLC and everything.
Maybe there's some that I've thought that about. Like we haven't talked about it yet somehow. But another giant one that went to the RPG sphere was Sonic the Hedgehog.
Mm-hmm.
You remember that? They had BioWare make a dark, like gritty Sonic the Hedgehog RPG.
Yep, that was for the DS, if I remember right.
It was, and I played it.
Does it work? Does it fit well?
No.
No.
It could have. But like what do I want to say? The gameplay was just not very fun.
Mm-hmm.
Sonic is like, I think, what's the word I'm looking for? He's like flexible enough as a character. I do think you can put him in dark things and it works. People will fight me on that. There people I'm sure will go, but look at Shadow, and I'm like, yeah, Shadow was like memed to hell and back, but Shadow was fun. If you played that game, it was still fun.
Mm-hmm.
And we like remember it fondly. I think like we kind of crap all over it for a while. It's kind of what we do. It's like we crap all over stuff, and then 10 years later we go, that was fun, and we remember it fondly. It's weird how we do that, but it also happened with like Wind Waker. People really hated Wind Waker when it came out, and now we're like, that's like the best Zelda game.
With Sonic in particular, my thought about it being an RPG is just that he is a character that's based around speed. So if you're making speed stuff turn-based, it becomes like super like a hard sell that it's like this character like runs so fast that he can like spin around loops to continue like up his map. And then it's like, well, he's going to stop and do a barrel roll attack or something. Like it just doesn't fit the character to be in that slower battle style.
I agree, and it's like I said, it was rough. It could have been done better than it was. They tried to make it more compelling with having you like do stuff on the DS's touchscreen to like do your attacks. You had to like interact with them, but it ended up just kind of being clunky. I don't know what qualifies you as a Sonic fan these days. I'm not really sure, because I haven't bought one of the games in a while. The last one I bought was Mania, and I absolutely loved it. That was a 10 out of 10 game for me. But it's like, I wasn't into Forces, and I'm not sure about the new one. I haven't seen enough of it yet to really know what we're doing anymore. So I'm like, I don't know. I guess I'm a Sonic fan, but it's like we go through real long stretches like that. Good games don't seem to come out.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, yeah, but I like the characters in the world enough as well that like I would be into an RPG for Sonic still. I don't know. It just needs to be done differently. And it's weird because that was also still in the time that like BioWare could commit no wrongs.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of don't understand, but maybe they felt kind of like you did, and that they were like, what do we do with this?
Yeah, it's just I don't like maybe if you had like super fast battle animations or maybe like the combat is like super streamlined.
Yeah, I think streamlined combat could work, because I'm thinking like one of my favorite Sonic games is Sonic Battle, which was a fighting game on the Game Boy Advance, and it was absolutely awesome.
Mm-hmm.
But it's it's still pretty quick. It's a fighting game, but you can move around. It's not like 2D exactly. It's like 3D, 2D, or I forget what that's called. It's 2D sprites, but you're in a 3D space, and you can move around that space pretty quickly.
Okay.
But I mean, that almost was a little bit RPG-like as well, because you do travel around the map, you talk to people. Your main character is a robot that you can teach to fight. And he does sort of get like stat points. So I'm like, I don't know, that kind of was RPG-ish Like maybe revisit that. I would definitely play a new one of those. You just don't have it be turn-based.
But yeah, they can hand it to intelligent systems and let them mess around with it a little bit.
We're just going right to the All-Stars, huh?
Well, you know more about gaming things than I do, so I don't know many, so I have to pick the All-Stars.
I gotcha.
Because they're the ones I know.
I mean, I wouldn't complain. I would be into that.
You could give it to Square. See, I know 2.
Yeah. That gives me a lot of ideas, though, because I hadn't thought of, like, the more anime space, but I'm like, yeah, like, I would definitely dig, like, a Bleach or Naruto one, like, SRPG or, like, more of those RPGs. I know there's some for both of those.
One Piece is in some level of getting an RPG style game. Full Metal Alchemist would be really cool.
One Piece is getting one now, I think, that they keep showing off.
Yeah, it's already, but not yet. Depending on when you're listening to this, hopefully it's yet and not now.
Yeah, I might check that out. Like, I'm not huge into One Piece, but I know that's one too that I'm like, I'm gonna, when One Piece finishes, I'll probably read it all the way through.
Mm-hmm. Animes are always so cool, but it's hard because there's so many. There's so much, and it's all usually pretty good. Like, I know you had said you like Sword Art Online.
No.
No? I totally, maybe that was somebody else.
No. Sword Art's one that I liked at the start. I think a lot of people did, and then it kind of, to me, went off the rails. But it was a good concept. It still is. And I know they make RPGs. Like, I don't know if they're any good, but I know that they've made a couple, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. Maybe those are good, but I'm never gonna say no to more games either. Like, you could be like, this should be an RPG, and I'd be like, yep, why not?
Another one that jumps out, and maybe if I just played Gundam games, I wouldn't need this in my world, but Pacific Rim could be really cool.
Ah, I haven't seen those, so I don't know too much. That's another one that's like, it's on my list. But yeah, I didn't bring up Gundam specifically because they do have a good amount of RPGs that
Mm-hmm.
I still need to get to, and I'd like them to localize more of those. But I would probably just wrap Pacific Rim into that because they have Super Robot Wars is one of the big ones,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a giant crossover with just tons of mecha series. I should probably check. Like, I'm just getting into all of this. Like, this is what I'm doing now. So I'm like, has Pacific Rim already been
I'm not sure
brought over?
the games feel much.
I'm not sure. No, it's been hacked in. There's fan mods, it looks like, that add Pacific Rim, but it doesn't seem like it's been added officially. So yeah, that would make sense as another one to add to that.
Because it's always fun to be like big robots fighting crazy monsters. So I think that would lend itself really well. And there's a lot of lore and stuff there that could be explored and flushed out well.
And I think it would fit in really well with Super Robot Wars stuff because that's also an SRPG. So I'm currently reading a lot of those series to play those games because I want to, like, it's like a giant crossover. So I'm like, I actually want to read these first. So like when they're like, oh my gosh, it's that guy, I don't go, and I want to know who that guy is.
Makes sense.
So I'm putting in the time, but they expect you, like, it's a series that's been going for like 30 years or something, like Fire Emblem. They expect you to know a lot. And they're making games that are about series that started in like sometimes like the 60s. So there's a lot to get into. So it's taking me forever to actually get through all these stories. They're really long. But I'm hoping that the payoff is going to be really good. Pacific Rim was a good idea. I mean, that kind of begs Godzilla as like a, could we do that maybe?
like rapid fire some things and not justify them, but just because they're like Chronicles of Narnia, I think could be kind of cool. That's been in the video game space a little bit, but not in a really traditional RPG format that I think would benefit it.
No, I think they've only gotten licensed games, if I'm not crazy.
Yep.
Licensed games and the unofficial like maps that I was making on the game Age of Mythology at like age 10.
Yep. So that would be a cool one to put into the game space. Like we were saying, a bunch of different animes would be good.
What was the fantasy comic that you brought up on our episode on my YouTube about the Shining Force comics?
Prince Valiant could be interesting. That's what we're thinking of. I think there could be some interesting use of Pixar movies that you could get in there that would fit really well, that have probably been done on a license basis to get a game out versus like a full flushed out game.
Yeah, we could do, if we're staying in comics too, I could do The Walking Dead could definitely take a little bit more of a beating than it already has.
Mm-hmm.
They have so many different like spin-offs of that at this point, like what's one more, and you know, get a little bit weirder with it, or like do something else, like give me Japanese Walking Dead. I know that's in a novel, but a game of that would be neat. Or just pick another country, show me how they deal with everything.
Mm-hmm. Like World War Z, if you're familiar with that at all, that can be interesting.
Little bit.
I've been on thinking about zombie stuff more recently because I've been watching a TV show about zombies. So there's, I think, some zombie stuff could work really well.
Well, people are going to wonder what the show is. So.
Oh, I've been watching iZombie.
Okay. Oh yeah, I saw you tweet about this. Okay.
Yeah. So I think there might be some interesting zombie ideas out there.
My dumbest idea that I can possibly cobble together is I really love B movies, like B horror movies made by a certain studio called Full Moon. And like all of their stuff, like they love to do weird, like interconnected stuff. They just did a comic series where like one of their very few hero characters goes and kills like the entire cast because they're mostly horror movies, so the interesting characters are all bad. But they had like one hero one, so yeah, he goes and murks all them. But it would be fun to have an RPG like exploring that world where like all these crazy things happen, and you know, there's all these like weird horror movie villains running around.
Mm-hmm. Okay, maybe. I don't know as much about horror, so I will take your word on it.
They have enough lore, because assuming like they don't even try to pretend it all happens in the same world, but like it would definitely behoove them to like go with it. So you could do like they have like a vampire series that takes place in Romania. So I mean, you could have like the, you know, like the vampires and stuff. There's superheroes, there's Godzilla type stuff they've made, there's like demon movies and stuff. Like you could do all sorts of stuff, and especially if they brought in some of the people that have worked on those movies, the creativity is off the charts. Okay. Like one of my favorite series from them, not to deviate too hard, is called Killjoy, and it starts really rough. Like the first two movies are pretty bad. The third one's a regular horror movie. The fourth one is, because Killjoy has not been a good enough villain, he is brought back to hell and put on trial, and it's a legal movie where he has to explain why he hasn't been a good enough villain. And ultimately he escapes at the end of that, and then part 5 is about he has lost like a lot of his reputation as like a villain and stuff, so he starts his own late night TV show.
Interesting. And
it has like, at the end it gets like sci-fi elements. So I'm just like, you bring like the guy behind that on, I think it was David Dakota was the guy that helped write a lot of that with Charles Band. That would be really fun.
Okay, I think I only have.
Hang on. Let me here's how I envision that. Conker's Bad Fur Day, the RPG. That's sort of what I'm getting at.
So I'm not sure I can top that, but I think since we're going for like horrible ideas or like potentially bad ideas that might be secretly good, I would think a Adam Sandler SRPG where you're just all his characters in one like game and just call it like Sandler, and it's just all his characters, like you recruit them and like you have like the Zohan guy, both Jack and Jill, his Punch Drunk Love character. Just combine all of them into like one game, and that would be your SRPG.
You could call it Sandler RPG, like SRPG.
Yeah. So.
I mean, there is a time in his career that he would have ripped that idea and been like, yup.
It might be now, where he's just kind of like getting his friends together and making movies and stuff. Like, it might be the perfect time for that.
I don't know. Or another one like Nicolas Cage feels like he would be able to lend himself to that as well. Like, I feel like he would be like, I'm in, let's do this. And like be super serious about it, and it would come out like really weird.
I feel like knowing him, like he'd get like super on board and he'd be like, I've decided to just code it, guys. And then like a few years it'd be released and it'd just be all the voice acting would be him, all the programming, and
I would want all of the sound effects to be him as well. You clash swords and it's just him going shing shing.
All right, I think this is where we wrap it, because we're not going to come up with anything better than that.
No, I don't think I can. I'm still thinking about this Adam Sandler one. Like, you have the click remote.
Yeah.
And you've got the guy from Uncut Gems that's like, what are the rest of these people doing?
Yeah, and then like his couple serious movies to like balance out like the cast.
Little Nicky hanging out.
Like Happy Gilmore has like a golf club. Like, it practically writes itself.
It kind of does. Who would the villains be though? Like Hollywood, his haters. Like, I don't know who the.
I don't know. Probably just characters from the movies.
It's a full crossover. I mean, yeah, I guess who else? Unless it's the Nicolas Cages, that could be the villain. I know when y'all clicked on this episode, this is exactly how you saw this ending.
I have no idea how I'm going to cut this together.
Lord Gamington demands Adam Sandler the SRPG.
Greenlit. All right. So, thank you everybody for listening. We really appreciate you stopping by. Check out our other show, Game Dev Hideout, where we talk to indie devs about the games they're working on. And once we find whoever's making the Adam Sandler SRPG, we will get them on. Probably for multiple episodes, because there's going to be a lot of questions for that person.
Oh, yeah.
But until that happens, keep tuning into the Turn by Turn podcast. Chris, where can the people find you?
The people can find me on Twitter. I'm kind of shifting to my gaming Twitter because I made one for my YouTube, and I'm kind of shifting to that for more of my gaming related stuff. So I am stalling until I can get the handle for that. You can find me at Nihil YouTube, Nihil YouTube. And that's where most of my gaming endeavors are going to be. And you can find me on YouTube at Nihil, Nihil, where I'm probably playing an SRPG of some sort, doing Shining Force things, or having a good time. And if you made it to the end of this episode, you are such a devoted listener, because this was a mess. I love you.
And you can basically find me at the Turn by Turn Pod, and you can find us wherever podcasts are sold. That 5-star review would mean the world. I shed a tear every time I see a new one. So we'd really appreciate that. And until next time, we will talk to you later. Bye.
Bye.